It is a film review Monday right here on the Locked On Cougars podcast, looking back at BYU's 27-14 victory over Texas Tech. What went wrong in the second half for BYU offensively and just overall for the offense in the game? We're talking about that as well as some of the other takeaways after a rewatch of BYU and Texas Tech right now on today's show.
You are Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast on the BYU Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, everybody? I'm Jake Hatch, your host here on Locked On Cougars, your resident BYU insider. Thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. Thank you to all of you who are everydayers with us right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Prize Picks as their title sponsor on today's show. Just a quick reminder that Prize Picks is daily fantasy sports made easy, and we'll tell you a little bit more about them as the show progresses throughout this edition of the podcast. All right, let's dive right in on today's show. And as we do on most Mondays in season, we'd call it a film review Monday. I have gone back. I have watched BYU and Texas Tech a second time through. And in many respects, by the way, the other thing about this is I say I watch it a second time. I'm constantly rewinding and looking at plays over and over again to get a better feel for things. So in some cases, I may have watched this game in reality 3, maybe 4 times, but nonetheless, I took a lot away from this. Now, in our postcast edition of the show, I said that BYU fans, you out there, should be happy that BYU's 5-2. Celebrate the victories. And I still stick by that statement. Some of you were upset that I chastised or however you wanted to interpret my comments on that. But let me say this. Rewatching the game in the second half, I get the consternation with BYU's offense right now. 277 total yards. It's not the production that Cougar fans for years and years, decade upon decade, have come to know. BYU fans, and I'll say this, I think most of y'all have been growing up like me, watching high-flying offense, and at some point when it has a dip like it has right now for BYU, you get upset about it. Now, I will not stand for people calling for Aaron Roderick's job right now. Alas, you guys forget so quickly that he has developed back-to-back quarterbacks that he put into the NFL. It's not that long ago, just last season, that BYU was putting up some pretty monster numbers on offense. A 1-year dip, he can survive that. He deserves, with his track record, speaking of Aaron Roderick, in my mind at least, that even if it doesn't necessarily right the ship this year and they don't necessarily become a 450 yards, 40-point a game type offense down the stretch run, and that may honestly be too tough to do with the opponents BYU has remaining on their schedule. But let me just say this. If you're going to think that you're going to fire him after this, who's going to take that job? Because you're going to look, if you're an offensive coordinator out there in college football, I don't care necessarily exactly what level you're at, you're going to look at the job at BYU. Let's say BYU were to move on from Aaron Roderick and say, hold up, this guy went and put together some pretty high-flying, epic offenses. He put 2 quarterbacks into the NFL. You fired him after the first year in the Big 12 because you had a dip with regards to your overall statistics, despite having a winning record. You're 3 games over 500 right now, speaking of BYU, and you're gonna fire this guy and move on. Why would I want to come in and have that type of pressure and assume that type of pressure as BYU's offensive coordinator? Why would you want to do that? So let's put down the pitchforks, douse your torches. Let's let things settle a little bit. We all knew there was going to be an adjustment period for BYU coming into the Big 12. I don't know what we spent all offseason talking about if we didn't realize that it was going to take some time for BYU to get up to speed to competing at this level. And they are competing, by the way. They are 5-2. Once again, BYU is winning games. And as many of you pointed out, they're doing it in spite of themselves in certain circumstances. But hey, they're winning football games. Good football teams win football games. Just win, baby. The famous line from Al Davis. It's all that really matters at the end of the day, folks. So let's be happy about that. Now, On to my game notes. So obviously, I think that the offense, yes, I do think that there was things to be improved upon in the second half. Now, there were missed opportunities for BYU in the second half. There was a big-time throw that Kedon Slovis put right on the hands of Darius Lassiter. Actually, 2 times he put it right on the hands of Darius Lassiter. Couldn't come up with the catch that would have converted on third down for BYU on 2 different drives in that second half. Other things that I think we should be paying attention to include BYU with regards to their run game. The passing game at points this season has come alive and looked absolutely electric. Look at Cincinnati, look at points during Kansas, look at even the Arkansas game when the passing attack has been at its best. If BYU can take what they did in the run game against Texas Tech, 150 yards, 5 yards per carry on just 30 carries, you can translate that and continue to pick up on that and have that be a part of the offense. And if you can marry that to some of the high-flying moments in the passing game that BYU's had this season, you're going to put together that offense that many of you out there have been crowing for and want so badly. Now, can they put that together? That's a big question mark because the final 5 games of the season for BYU have 4 of the top 5 teams at the top of the Big 12 standings right now. The Cougars are currently in a tie for 6th at 2-2 in the conference. Like I mentioned, 4 of the opponents BYU has remaining on their schedule are currently above them in the standing. So very, very tough season ahead. Obviously, we're in the middle of the season, but a very tough final stanza of this campaign for BYU. But hey, if they continue to force turnovers at an astronomical clip, and they have already got 16 on the season as a whole, speaking of BYU, there's no reason to think that they can't continue to stay in these games. Now, games like Texas and the home game against Oklahoma, when they're both top 10 ranked teams, I get that there's a concern that you could get absolutely boat raced in those games. But you know what? The big difference for BYU is they've got to continue to stick to what is working for them. And that's finding a run game that is picking up tough yards when it needs to. I know it's not pretty and it hasn't necessarily been efficient most of this year, but it was quite efficient against Texas Tech, who was a middle-of-the-road Big 12 rush defense. Now, can you do it against one of the more elite rush defenses when it goes up against Texas? That's a big question mark this week. The 5 turnovers for BYU, absolutely critical to their success. It's been critical for any success BYU has had this year. You would have liked to see them cash in on more points on those turnovers. BYU only got 13 points off of the 5 turnovers they forced. Now, 2 of them, the Jacob Robinson interception at the end of the first half, that was an end of half play. Had he been able to get out of bounds, maybe with the second remaining, BYU may have been able to attempt a field goal in that circumstance. And then the late interception for Ethan Slade, BYU was able to grind out the clock after that just by running the football. So it was an end of the game scenario. So 13 points, yeah, not your most efficient in terms of capitalizing on your turnovers, but it still was 13 points you cashed in on. Obviously, the touchdown, the lone touchdown of the bunch coming when Eddie Heckard pounced on that fumble in the end zone. And obviously the other 2 were field goals as a result of those turnovers. So turnovers continue to be a key part of BYU's success this year. Is it something you can rely upon moving forward? I know that it's an oddly shaped football and it bounces weird ways, but hey, BYU's proven so far this year that they have been able to get the bounces to go their way. And if they continue to do that, they're going to find themselves with chances in these games. Eddie Heckard, I thought, was absolutely phenomenal for BYU. I thought Jacob Robinson, despite being targeted heavily by Texas Tech, held up well. I thought the cornerbacks overall for BYU were very, very solid, but they were actually outplayed by the safeties. And Pro Football Focus had both Ethan Slade and Crew Wakely as the Cougars' top-rated players grade-wise from PFF. And for good reason. Ethan Slade and Crew Wakely looked absolutely phenomenal against Texas Tech. Now, the athletes at Texas Tech, in some cases, pale in comparison to what they're going up against in the likes of Texas and Oklahoma down the stretch run of the season here. But it was good to see those guys standing out on the back end of BYU's defense. Also, BYU's run fits when it comes to their rush defense, I thought it was actually very solid for BYU. Yes, they did give up a number of rushing yards, but they did make it very tough on Taj Boyd, who remains the top rusher in all of FBS football, nearly 900 yards on the season at this point. They made it very tough for him to get to his 600 yards in that game, 3.4 yards per carry. It's not necessarily an elite number, but is a very, very good number in terms of the overall yards per carry average for him. He had to get 31 touches to get to 105 yards. You'll take that if you're BYU. I thought the linebacking core was quite solid. Now some wrap-up mishaps and just ducking your head and that type of stuff allowed some yak yards after contact for the running backs for Texas Tech. You can work on cleaning that stuff up. It was very nice to see. Also, two of the freshmen I saw playing this game I was very, very intrigued by. Both of them true freshmen, one being Siale Acera, just recently removed from Timpview High School, and obviously a guy that I think is going to make an impact for BYU down the stretch here at linebacker. And then also John Henry Daly. His older brother Michael Daly decided to leave the program last week. Well, John Henry stepped into the lineup and looked very, very good. The future for both of those two young men looks very, very bright. Combine that with Harrison Taggart and him butting into being a very, very good middle linebacker for BYU. There are some key cornerstones for BYU defensively to build around. And I think you'll see their playing time continue to increase as the season progresses. All right. So that is all of the, one other thing real quick on the positives from this game. LJ Martin on that 55-yard run to open the game for BYU. That play, if you go back and watch it, it was blocked up to near perfection. Now, you have to when running backs are running a football, the idea is to block it up so they essentially have one guy to beat. And if you look at the play as it develops, BYU's offensive line, the tight end Isaac Rex, wide receiver I think it was Keelan Marion on the play side of that, they all had a hat on a hat, as they say. They were all blocking their guys and blocked it up nicely. That left LJ Martin and the Texas Tech safety one-on-one. LJ Martin made a phenomenal move, broke a couple of tackles, and was off to the races at that point. More often than not, running backs can break those tackles. You've got to block it up, though. When it's 2 and 3 guys that you're going up against as a running back, that's when it becomes very, very tough. And it was good to see it get it blocked up. I thought BYU's run blocking overall for most of the night was quite good. Aiden Robbins came in and was the absolute hammer in the final stanza of this game to seal it up. Some people were saying, why isn't LJ Martin in there? Well, Aiden Robbins is just a 225-pound battering ram. Why wouldn't you give him the football and say, go get those tough yards? Why would you subject LJ Martin to extra punishment if you don't need to? So I thought those were all positives for BYU in this game. And obviously, I think they can build upon stuff from this one moving forward. Now, the bad, the ugly, things that need to be cleaned up for BYU, we'll talk about those because there's plenty of that as well, even despite the win for BYU. We'll dig into those notes coming up momentarily right here on Locked On Cougars. Now, a quick word on our friends over at Athletic Brewing. They've been working with us for a couple of months now since the football season began. Now it is time for your Game Changer of the Week, brought to you by Athletic Brewing Company. Much like, and I'm going to give the nod this week to Aiden Robbins. Athletic Brewing has completely changed the non-alcoholic beer game. They make non-alcoholic beers that actually taste good. And why I picked Aiden Robbins, it was his first real extensive action for BYU this year, and he started to show the flashes of why BYU was so excited to get him into a Cougar uniform coming off a 1,000-yard season a year ago for UNLV. He had a rib injury, and it's been widely reported at this point that we've been dealing with all season long. He is nearly, he's fully recovered at this point and looked very, very good. And like I said, was the absolute hammer to help BYU grind out that victory and close shop against Texas Tech. And that's why Athletic Brewing is here. They want to have your Game Changer of the Week for you guys because they are changing the non-alcoholic beer game. They make non-alcoholic beers that actually taste good. Their brews are great tasting and award-winning. They beat out full-strength beers in global competition. So give them a shot, my friends. They are fit for all times. You can drink them anytime, anywhere, and make any activity more enjoyable, and obviously with no hangover effect. That's the best part about it. So go online and get your order placed there, or go to your local store near you and buy Athletic Brewing's non-alcoholic brews at a store near you. But if you want to go online, you can go to athleticbrewing.com, and first-time customers, you use the promo code Locked On for 15% off your first order. That's promo code LOCKEDON at checkout for 15% off at athleticbrewing.com. Near beer exclusions and conditions do apply. It's all courtesy of Athletic Brewing Company, fit for all times. Today's show is also brought to you by our friends over at UCCU. They have Learn and Earn, the app that is paying your family to learn about money. Simple as that, my friends. Parents don't always have the answers for all the questions or even their own questions about money, and that's where Learn and Earn steps in. It breaks down financial topics into fun, bite-sized topics and educational games, and every time a family member completes one of these lessons, you earn points that accrue and can be redeemed for gift cards to many, many stores like Apple, Amazon, Sephora, Walmart, Nike, and many, many more. There's age-appropriate content for every member of the family who can compete against one another and track your progress on leaderboards as well. Learn and Earn is inside the UCCU mobile banking app, so play it anytime, anywhere, and get started today. It's all courtesy of Learn and Earn, part of UCCU's award-winning Be Money Smart Youth Banking Program, helping kids, teens, and parents have fun while becoming more financially literate together. It's all courtesy of Utah Community Credit Union. Love where you bank. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars a part of your routine. Thank you for being everydayers with us right here on the podcast. Quick reminder that Friday morning, Locked On College Football Kickoff Live is available on YouTube. It goes live at 9 a.m. Mountain Time. That's 11 a.m. Eastern Time for an hour, getting you ready for the weekend ahead in college football. Check it out. It's all on YouTube, across the YouTube channels of the Locked On College channel, including this channel, Locked On Cougars. All right, let's talk about the bad and the ugly from this win for BYU. I know those don't necessarily usually jive with one another, but there was still plenty for BYU to clean up. One thing I noticed, tempo still catches BYU off guard at times. I don't necessarily get it. You've got to get down and get ready. Now, I know that BYU's checking the sidelines and Jay Hill's trying to get a feel for what the formation looks like as he tries to get his calls in. BYU's got to relay those calls quicker. There are times that tempo is still catching BYU napping, so to say, when it comes to their defense. You want to see them clean that up. Third down defense continues to be an issue for BYU. It was better than it was a week ago against TCU. 12 of 19 in that game, over 60% in terms of conversions for the Horned Frogs. In this game for Texas Tech, 9 of 18, still 50%, so still a bit high, but it was an improved product. You want to see them continue to work on that. Jay Hill harped on it all last week, and it sounds like BYU is taking that and internalized it. Now it's going to take some time for them to really figure everything out, and I think that's going to continue to kind of be an issue for BYU in terms of just the overall caliber of athletes they're facing here in the Big 12. But you want to see them cut that number to sub 50, at least maybe even sub 40%, ideally for BYU on defense. Let's see. Chase Roberts still not 100% out there. You could tell that in that game, but still is absolutely BYU's number one wide receiver. I wonder how much might have changed had he been 100% healthy in that game. Also having Keanu Hill in a game like this against Texas Tech. Some of those tougher catches that may have been dropped. Could those two have come up with some bigger catches and help BYU convert in some circumstances? We'll never know. It's one thing that needs to be cleaned up. The second half offense, I know it wasn't pretty. Multiple punts, 3 and outs, not grinding the clock like you would have liked BYU to see this game out and maybe blow it wide open, honestly. But the thing about it is, as I mentioned right off the top of the show, a couple of drops from Darius Lassiter, some missed blocking assignments on the perimeter at times for BYU. There was just, and by the way, the other thing about this, in the second half, there's a lot of east-west action for BYU, a lot of going sideline in terms of working the width of the field, not the length of it. I would have liked to see BYU go more north-south with some of the stuff they did in that second half, but only Aaron Roderick can answer for exactly why he approached that. He'll be speaking on the Coordinator's Corner program on BYU TV today. Do I expect Greg Wrubell to grill him on it? Not necessarily, but we'll have our first opportunity to speak with him on Wednesday, and hopefully we'll be able to get a little more in terms of the information from him and talk more about that. All right, and now in terms of other things that need to be cleaned up that I listed as the ugly. Third down offense, 4 of 14 in this game for BYU. You get that to 7 of 14, and BYU very well may have had another touchdown or two on the board. It's really that simple. You've got to find success earlier in some of these drives for BYU. Aaron Roderick talked about it last week. You got to have success on first and second down to avoid getting into 3rd and 8 and 3rd and 9. He said the average for most of the season this year for BYU on third down is 3rd and 9. That run game is going to be a big differentiator for BYU. If you can pick up 2 and 3 yards consistently a pop, if not more than that, you can push it to maybe 4 or 5 yards. That's going to get you into more manageable downs and distances, especially when it comes to third down. And you'll see that percentage tick up, but it needs to be worked on. It still continues to be a massive issue for BYU. Jackson Cravens is BYU's best defensive tackle, but who's number 2? There's been a rotating cast of characters alongside him. Caden Haws, David Latu, Altanai Samahe, etc. on the interior. John Nelson at times. There's no clear number 2 defensive tackle. You need to have another stout body in the middle of that defense. It felt like when Texas Tech had their best success running the football against BYU, it was up the gut where that other defensive tackle may have been in the circumstance that Jackson Cravens was in there. You need to find a consistent contributor there. I don't know that necessarily it's going to be a stalwart that's going to step up at this point in the season, but you got to see better play from the other defensive tackles not named Jackson Cravens. I know that PFF ranked Atunaisa Mahe very high in terms of their overall grades, but I think it was more because he got 2 QB hits or pressures in that game, more so than his rush defense. That was my personal opinion on that. The touchdown on 3rd and 18, the Texas Tech scored. And it's 3rd and 18. It's another, by the way, 3rd and 18 and a 72-yard touchdown. That will give you a 3rd down conversion plus a TD. So you got to get off the field. And BYU, if you watch that play back, and I watched it about 4 different times, watching it back, there was confusion pre-snap. Safeties moving all over the place, barking at each other. Corners not necessarily getting the calls relayed to them. Heckard was with his guy, but then lets him go, thinking that it was Ethan Slade. Yeah, it was Ethan Slade was going to be over the top in coverage. Well, Ethan Slade was playing the middle of the field, and then you see Jake Strong, the quarterback from Texas Tech, his eyes get wide. He sees that seam open up, and he fires it in there. And touchdown. You got to have that communication relayed. You cannot continue to have these coverage busts. If you're having coverage busts like that against a program the caliber of Texas Tech right now, imagine what the likes of Texas Tech, West Virginia, even Oklahoma State, what are they capable of doing against you? That's the concern you got to have. You've got to be on the same page every single time you're on the football field, and I'm expecting they will clean that up with better communication this week. And then final note from me is spitting on opponents remains the most stupid thing I can ever imagine. Why in the world is a tight end and then obviously reportedly a right tackle spitting on Tyler Batty in this game? I don't care what circumstances, what they may be. You do not spit on people. I hope that the Big 12 takes action on this. I don't necessarily know what action they will take. I don't expect it to be a multiple game suspension, that type of stuff, because I just don't see that happening. But you don't spit on people. Why in the world would that be in your thought of your mind? You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to spit on this guy. That's demeaning. It's deplorable. It's just don't do it. And by the way, there was some pushing and shoving in this game. This Texas Tech BYU series could end up becoming a pretty decent rivalry if that continues. Now, obviously, we'll see if they play again next season and beyond that. But there was some back and forth in this game, and I am interested to see if it can develop into something as the era of the Big 12 continues for BYU here. But I just cannot accept those 2 young men having the thought in their mind, I'm going to spit on an opponent. It's disgusting. It's vile. I can't abide that. And I hope that the Big 12 takes some action and make sure that Joey McGuire and his program know that will not be tolerated. You cannot have that. All right. So there you go. My notes. So let me reiterate. I get the concern. I get the feeling that, hey, BYU is up against it when it comes to the stretch run of the season here. I get all that. And the offense is still very much a work in progress in the back half of the season. But it very well may be this is just how BYU is going to operate this year, folks. So I don't know what to tell you. If it's going to have you check out on BYU despite them being 5-2 on the year at this point, so be it. But they're winning football games. And like I said, the mark of a good football program is finding ways to win football games. This is not the typical way to win football games. And in many respects, had the ball bounced a different way, BYU could have a sub 500 record. But you know what? They're getting the fortunate bounces this year so far, and they're 5-2 on the year. They're a game away from bowl eligibility, and I'm feeling pretty bullish on BYU getting to at least 6 wins and possibly even 7. I don't think West Virginia is as hot as they were maybe just a couple of weeks ago. I think they may be sliding. I was already reading something that Neil Brown is already right back on the hot seat after the back-to-back losses for the Mountaineers. Iowa State seems to be an interesting team. Defense, very, very good. Offense, still very much a challenge for them. Can you grind out enough on your home turf, speaking of BYU hosting Iowa State, to get the win? We'll see. I think that BYU is going to go bowling. I'm very confident in saying that right now. Now, I could be dead wrong about that, and you can pull the receipts when I'm dead wrong about it and shove it right back in my face, and I'll be happy to eat that. Well, I won't be happy to eat that crow because BYU won't be going to the postseason, but I'm casting my lot that BYU is going to be bowl eligible this year, whether it's 6 or 7 wins. I think that's where things may be topping out for the Cougars. But nonetheless, I think it'd be a pretty good debut for BYU, considering if you get to 6 or 7 wins, that's 3 or 4 wins in terms of your first year in the Big 12, and that'd probably have you middle of the pack in terms of the overall Big 12 race. I think it'd be a pretty good spot for BYU to be in, considering the other three newcomers, Cincinnati, UCF, and Houston, have all had their struggles more so than BYU entering the conference so far. All right. We'll finish up this edition of the podcast with some early notes on Texas. Whereas BYU, in terms of the betting odds, a big injury for the Texas Longhorns, as well as BYU makes the trip to Austin. And it's a big night for BYU women's soccer. We'll talk about all that coming up here in just a moment. Real quick, a word on our friends over at Prize Picks. We've been talking about Prize Picks for a couple of weeks now. And what it is Prize Picks has got a great way to have fun with daily fantasy. And the best part about it is it's not you competing against other people. It's you versus the numbers, you versus the computer. Simple as that. You pick an over-under on the projected stats for 2 to 6 players, and if you win money. Simple as that. It's the most fun you can have with daily fantasy sports. You win up to 25 times your own bet amount this football season. You pick 2 or more players, pick more or less on the projected stats, and place your entry. It can be done in less than 60 seconds, folks. It's really that simple. Quick withdrawals, easy gameplay, and an enormous selection of players and stat types are what make Prize Picks the #1 daily fantasy sports app. So get on it and take advantage of it today. They offer Apple Pay for quick and easy deposits into your account during the football season. And they even are offering weekly promotions that can lead to big payouts like Taco Tuesday. Every Tuesday, Prize Picks discounts select player selections up to 25% to provide even more value for you, the consumer. Get on it today, take advantage of it, and do it with our friends at Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/lockedoncollege. Use the promo code LOCKEDONCollege for a first deposit match of up to $100. Put $100 in, get $100 from our friends at Prize Picks. Have $200 to play with. Simple as that. That's prizepicks.com using the promo code LOCKEDONCollege for that first deposit match. It's all courtesy of your friends at Prize Picks. Daily fantasy sports made easy. Thank you once again for joining us on a Monday edition of Locked On Cougars. Hope you all are doing well. If you guys don't mind doing so, please continue to subscribe, rate, and review the show. My big push this week is I want you guys, if you're listening to this on Apple Podcasts, even if you're not, if you have an iPhone, go on Apple Podcasts and leave us a 5-star rating and a quick sentence or two, what you like about the show, what you'd like to see improved about the show. Leave us a comment. Leave us a 5-star rating. We're going to start giving you guys some shout outs. For those of you who do leave those, it's really simple. It takes less than 5 seconds to do it. You tap the 5 stars and on you go. So please consider doing that this week and helping us out right here on Locked On Cougars. All right. Opening line from our friends over at FanDuel for BYU at Texas. It's not kind to the Cougars. It opened up at 18.5 points in terms of BYU being a massive underdog in this game. Other sports books, had BYU as high as a 20.5 point underdog. Other ones had it as low as 16 points. So BYU is at least 2, if not 3 scores in terms of the overall line going into this matchup against the 7th ranked Texas Longhorns. Now, Texas has had a pretty significant injury of their own at the quarterback position. Quinn Ewers suffered a grade 2 sprain of the AC joint in his throwing shoulder. Now, any of you have had a sprained shoulder, no, it's an annoying and it's quite painful in many respects. And a grade 2 is going to cost him, it sounds like, at least a couple of weeks, if not longer than that, for Texas. Well, here it is about Texas. They only have 2 high-level athletes in terms of star rankings as their backup quarterbacks. One being Malik Murphy, a former 4-star prospect out of California, and then some kid by the name of Arch Manning, like the #1 quarterback prospect in like the last recruiting cycle, a 5-star prospect. He's got some uncles named Peyton and Eli. He's got a grandpa named Archie, you know the Mannings. Yeah. So no shortage of talent for Texas in terms of replacing Quinn Ewers, but Ewers has been very, very good for the Longhorns. We'll see how they adapt to having a backup quarterback. And it'll be the 3rd straight week BYU will be facing a backup quarterback in the month of October this season. And like I said, this is a higher level of backup, but an injury all the same that BYU hopefully can take advantage of, and we'll see what happens. And the other thing about this, folks, is do you know the last time BYU played on the road at a top 10 ranked team? Some of you are shouting at me right now. Yeah, it was Wisconsin in 2018. They were number 6 in the country, and BYU went in with having no chance to win, and they got the win on the home turf out there in Wisconsin. It's true. It was 2018. BYU went to number 6 Wisconsin and stunned the Badgers. You remember that game? It really kind of launched this most recent run for BYU under Jeff Grimes as the OC. Aaron Roderick was the passing game coordinator. Kind of ignited BYU's run that they've kind of carried on through this present day, and pretty cool stuff. So there's some history here suggesting BYU's got a chance to win this. And by the way, the last time BYU played a top 10 ranked team was last season when Baylor came to Provo. They were ranked 9th, and obviously BYU in that win in overtime was pretty thrilling in its own right. So some history on the side of BYU, but this Texas team, they are no joke with regards to the amount of talent they've got on the roster, and that'll be interesting to see how BYU adapts to that. All right, and then 2 other quick notes before we go on today's show is congratulations to number 9 ranked BYU women's volleyball. Back-to-back sweeps last week of Iowa State, who was nationally ranked. Huge wins for BYU in the Smith Fieldhouse both Thursday and Friday night. Congratulations to the Cougars. They are back in action this week as they head to Manhattan, Kansas this week for a matchup with Kansas State on Thursday night at 5:30 p.m. Mountain Time. It will be on Big 12 Now on ESPN Plus streaming if you want to check that out Thursday night. And then tonight, a huge matchup, the final regular season match for BYU as they take on UCF. The Cougars ranked number 7 in the country. 11 seniors being honored tonight at South Field as they finish out their final regular season match. And BYU should be able to get a pretty big win here. It would be very important for them in terms of the seeding for postseason play with regards to the Big 12. Cougars 13-1-3 on the year, 6-0-3 in the Big 12. And UCF is no slouch, so they're going to have to obviously earn this one, but some cool history is made last week for BYU, by the way. Jamie Shepard now holds the record for the most games played by any BYU soccer player in program history. She's at 99 and counting. She plays tonight. She gets her 100th cap, as you soccer fans are well aware, for BYU. Bella Felino is now number 2 with 98 career games, and both of them will be well over 100 games by the time the postseason comes for BYU. So congratulations to both of them, and congratulations to Brecken Mozingo. Let's see who else. Not Aaron Bailey. She's not a senior this year. Kendall Peterson. Some really, really talented players playing their final game in the regular season at South Field, and this should be a fun night for all involved. Game time on that is set for 6 o'clock Mountain Time on South Field. It'll be on Big 12 Now on ESPN Plus. Greg Wrubell will be on the call. I believe there's still some tickets available if you want to go to BYUtickets.com and get out to South Field and celebrate senior night with the rest of Cougar Nation. So there you go. All the notes you guys needed to know about on a Monday and my thoughts as I rewatch that game from UCF. Let me know your thoughts. Am I up in the night? Have I broken things down concretely enough? Do you guys feel confident? Do you feel worried? I welcome it, any and all feedback. I truthfully do that. I do appreciate it. The good, the bad, the negative, the positive, all of it. I cannot thank you guys enough for the support of the podcast. It's simple as that. I appreciate the fact that you guys even take the time to check this out. Thousands of you do it on a daily basis. And truthfully, it makes me happy that you guys think it's at least a quality product that you guys enjoy at least watching on a regular basis. So once again, thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. Thank you to all of you, by the way, once again, who are everydayers with us here. And we'll be back with you guys again tomorrow, right here on Locked On Cougars. See ya.